Hello, and thank you for joining our first virtual public information meeting for the I-95 Fairfield-Bridgeport Mobility Study. We are performing this study to analyze how the corridor functions and how it could be improved to better serve the surrounding communities. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to explain the study process, benefits and outcomes, present existing conditions in the study area, and to collect your feedback on the needs and deficiencies we will be reviewing with you tonight. It is important for us to understand your concerns and ideas so we can include these in our next step, which will be designing improvements to address mobility issues for all users within the study corridor area. I am Karen Isherwood, project engineer with the Connecticut Department of Transportation, Major Highways Unit. The mobility study is being conducted by a team of consultants led by GM2 Associates. I will now turn the presentation over to JJ Samus from GM2, who will introduce you to the rest of the study team and lead you through tonight's presentation.
Thanks, Karen. You can go to the next slide, Raul. So today, thank you guys for all joining us. We're going to have a question and answer session format in this intermittently throughout the entire presentation as well at the end. Our project manager, Dave Mancini's email is on screen, as well as a phone number for you to call in and voice your questions or concerns, as well as our website at I-95Fairfield-Bridgeport.com. Next slide. And also in accordance with Title VI, we have information at the link provided for civil rights information. A recording of the presentation will also be posted to CTDOT's YouTube channel, as well as their study website after this event. Closed captioning, including non-English translation options, are also available on Zoom and YouTube. Next slide. For the purposes of this Zoom, to show the subtitles, you can click the Show Captions, then click Speaking Language, and then select the language you'd like from the shown list. Next slide. Just some quick housekeeping items. Again, just for everybody's knowledge, this meeting is being recorded, and the presentation will be posted to the project website at www.I-95Fairfield-Bridgeport.com. People can call in via video conferences you have or via phone, which we are monitoring. And there's two ways to communicate during the session. You can raise your hand and verbally state a question after being called on, or type a question or comment into the Q&A and be ready to have your question be read aloud and answered by the study team. Next slide. To ask a question, there are the two options again. You would select the Q&A tool at the bottom of the Zoom webinar or the raise hand, as well as the Q&A window will pop up once you click the Q&A. And then you can type your questions in the text box there and click enter. And if you're an audio only participant, if you dial *9, it will raise and lower your hand. Next slide. So as Karen mentioned, this is our study team. We're led by CTDOT with Neil Patel, Dave Mancini, and Karen Isherwood running the project on their side. On our side, I am JJ Samus, joined today by Danielle Dixon and Matt Vale, our project manager. Our team is also led by Tony Margiotta and Rich Armstrong on our side, and we're supported by our teams SLR, FHI, and CDM Smith, who will have present throughout the presentation today as well. Next slide. Just a quick run of what we're going to show today. We're going to have an introductory to the study video, which we did play at our other public involvement meetings. So pardon the formatting, it's going to address you as if you've walked into a room, but we're going to step through each one of our boards. We'll also cover what is a planning and environmental linkages study, as well as provide an overview of all the data that we've collected to date and all the analysis that we've conducted from a variety of perspectives that we have here listed on the screen, as well as providing what is a purpose and need, which is our next big task that we need to establish based on the results, as well as providing information on our next steps. And with that, we'll lead into the video.
Good evening, and welcome to the public information meeting for the I-95 mobility.
I can hear it, but now we can't see it.
Areas. We're thrilled to have you join us tonight. This 5-minute introductory presentation will introduce you to the ongoing study. After the presentation, we invite you to walk around the room to the various presentation boards and ask questions of the team. My name is Rick Black, one of the team members, serving as the environmental study lead. CONDOT is leading this effort and have a team of consultants consisting of GM2, SLR, FHI Studio, and CDM Smith. To put a few faces to the names, Dave is our CONDOT project manager, Rich is the study manager, Raul has been spearheading the public involvement. JJ is the traffic lead, and I am the environmental study lead. The study is about 10 miles long, from about 1.5 miles south of exit 19 near Sasko Creek Road to just north of exit 30 near the Bridgeport-Stratford city lines. It also includes adjacent state roads such as routes 1, 8, and 130. The intent is to look at the transportation issues in the corridor along with sensitive resources and recommend solutions to address the transportation needs while reducing impacts to the human and natural environments and striving to improve quality of life through transportation solutions for all community members within the corridor. Keep in mind, this is just a study as of now, and no specific project has been identified. The I-95 mobility study is called a PEL study. PEL stands for Planning and Environment Linkages and is a federal highways term for this very high-level study. A PEL study is intended to link the bigger regional planning efforts to more project-specific environmental studies. A PEL is reliant upon input from the community. The linking of this community input, the larger regional planning and environmental issues creates better real-world collaborative solutions to transportation needs in the area. At the end of the PEL, CONDOT will produce a comprehensive report that summarizes the PEL and provides recommended solutions for the transportation needs in the corridor. The PEL study process follows the following steps. There's an identification of transportation issues and a prioritization of those issues. Next, along with community input, a vision is developed for implementing improvements in the study area. Areas of environmental and community concern are highlighted and studied at a very broad level to understand constraints that need to be considered in developing solutions to the identified transportation issues. After the development of real-world solutions and any associated mitigative strategies, a roadmap is developed to dovetail the PEL information into a more detailed project-level environmental study. Only then can projects be identified and recommended for implementation, both short and long-term. As the study schedule illustrates, the team has begun collecting data. Now we need your input. Stay involved. Help us shape the study's outcomes. Attend future public meetings and provide input on the study's goals and purpose and need, the range of potential solutions. Only with your input, along with the data collected, can the team develop proper goals and begin to understand potential solutions to the identified transportation needs within the study area. We need your input. The team has already begun reaching out to many stakeholders in the study area. Some of the outreach is focused on roadway layout and potential improvements, traffic concerns, and answered a host of other questions. This outreach has included meetings with several groups such as waterfront advisory boards, historic commissions, commissions that represent special needs, fire departments, planning developments, neighborhood and revitalization zones, along with several state representatives and councilmen and women. There have been pop-ups at Latino festivals and community days and farmers markets, as well as the establishment of a public advisory committee. The Public Advisory Committee, or PAC, is made up of individuals from various public and private sectors. They've been asked to represent you, the community, and these representatives have been invited to attend the I-95 study PAC meetings to gain information and ask questions. This slide shows an extensive list of members of this I-95 mobility study PAC who have been invited to represent you in this capacity. Once again, thanks for your interest in this study. We now invite you to go visit the information boards in the room. They'll provide you information on the study process, transportation needs, environmental resources, and other modes of community transportation. You can also better view the entire study corridor on the large map in the center of the room. Please ask questions of the team. Provide concerns to the team. Suggest solutions to the team. We want to hear your voice. Leave us written or verbal comments. And once again, thanks and enjoy your evening.
All right, bear with me another moment. I'm just going to put the presentation back on. Can everybody see my screen there?
Yes,
Yep.
sir.
See the presentation? Okay, great.
Rick, could you take it away?
Sure. So as it was stated in the little video clip, we are embarking upon a planning and environment linkages study, which is intended to be a collaborative and integrative approach to looking at planning in the region and within the corridor. The planning and environment linkages refers to linking the planning area regionally for the municipalities with any project level environmental studies that would come out of that. So you can see that there are many, many benefits to doing a Pell like this. And some of those benefits that we'd like to emphasize are getting the community input to understand what the needs really are in the corridor. We can look and we will show you some of the needs and deficiencies that we have studied to date, but we don't drive the corridor daily. We don't live against the corridor. We don't use the corridor for community activities daily. So we need the community to provide us with their perception of the needs within the corridor. Once we do that, we can finalize a purpose and a need for the study. And once we get a purpose and a need for the study, that can start putting together the guidelines or the bookends for a screening process to take solutions, whether they are from the design team or from the community, that could solve some of the needs as identified, and use this purpose and need statement as the first level of screening. And what this will do is at the end of the study, we hope to be able to recommend some solutions within the corridor to address some of the needs that have been identified through the purpose and need statement. Once we recommend these solutions that could be different projects, these different projects then would have to go through the environmental process, the environmental review process. Now, each one of these projects has already gone through this linking of all of the other planning and making sure that we do or do not impact other planning efforts or even support them. And so that'll streamline this NEPA process and reduce the time and the cost for each one of the projects. So it's very important to engage with you, the community, and really get your understanding and your perception of what the needs are, so that as we develop solutions together to some of those needs, we can shorten the process once projects are identified and go into the environmental process. And JJ is going to start talking about some of the needs and the deficiencies that the project has seen to date.
Sure, thanks, Rick. So I'm going to talk through all of the analysis conducted, but we've broken it down into a few segments, so I'm not going to bore you with the direct download of everything that we've done in one fell swoop. We'll have some breaks in here to provide opportunity for feedback. So we're going to begin with roadway design and structural design. And the way that we broke this down is we attempted to, tie back design to how it feels to be a driver or person using the corridor. These are largely focused on the I-95 corridor. So those are broken down into congestion points, whereas if you're driving on mainline I-95 and people are trying to get on and off, how do you feel? This can be due to, lack of sight distance, how, far down a distance you can see, how many ramps are closely spaced to one another. So when you're driving along, how it feels to just go through the entire corridor. Then there's driver comfort. It's when you're in congestion, how do you feel while you're driving? And this can be when you're in a really narrow lane and a big truck goes by or is near you when you're sitting in congestion. Or if you're going fairly high speeds and you're still in pretty good congestion, you may feel a little bit nervous. because there's not enough shoulder. So you may inherently slow down because there's not a lot of place to go if there is a reason to stop suddenly. Then there's the ease of getting on and off, looking at ramps, when you're trying to get on or off, do you have enough distance to decelerate, to come to a stop at the light? Or if you're trying to get on, is there enough time for you to accelerate to be able to merge safely? And then ease of navigation. When there's no congestion, how does it feel to be on the roadway? When you go around a curve, do you feel safe when you're traveling the speed limit? Is there water after it rains? All these are things that we take into account. And we look at these through the lens of what is deemed to be a design standard. So when we talk about something not meeting today's standards, we deem it deficient. Now, it's really important to identify that deficient does not mean unsafe. It just means it's something that we need to examine. A lot of these facilities are very old, and part of the study is that we need to identify those locations and through our alternatives development, bring them up to those standards to meet everything that's necessary to function correctly today. And when we're looking at this, we can see there are several areas of improvement along the main line that we can fix from a design perspective. Go ahead and go to the next slide. And we look at structures in general. The bridges and structures along the corridor meet those standards developed and provided by CTDOT, with a few bridges needing to be reviewed, but these will all, again, be part of what we're trying to address during this project. Now, quickly, as we move into the next slide, we're going to go ahead and open it back up for questions, just in case anybody has any questions about design or any of the aspects of the roadway itself. This is just, again, if you'd like to be heard, feel free to raise your hand, type your question in a Q&A, and we'll pause for a few seconds here. Raul, did you want to take over for a sec? Is there anybody we need to address?
Right now, I don't see any questions in the Q&A, and no one has raised their hand yet. So I think we can continue on, and we have a couple more breaks for questions. If you do have another question as we finish up the presentation, we'll also end the presentation with a Q&A session if you want to hang out and ask some questions to the project team. But nothing right now, JJ, so I think we can continue on with the presentation.
Okay, let's go ahead and go to the next one. So what we're going to talk about now is traffic conditions. So that is a challenging topic to try to cover because everybody drives in traffic, but what actually leads to traffic breaking down and slowing down is really hard to describe. It could be a lot of things. Traditionally, it can be capacity. So it's easy to assume by adding lanes that we could fix a congestion problem. But there's a lot of different things and a lot of different perspectives to that topic. Weaving, which is where you have a ramp get on and then a lane continue on and then immediately get off, can cause friction along a main line, which causes everybody to slow down. A decel lane that might not be long enough could cause people to brake while they're still traveling along the main line, which could cause backups. There may not be enough room for somebody to get onto the interstate. So therefore, they may either merge when they're not moving fast enough or even stop at the top of the ramp, which could also cause congestion. Or, there's the other option, which is the actual signal at the end of the ramp isn't giving enough time for you to go through it. So that backs up onto the interstate, causing more problems. And the way that we grade these operations is by using a score, much like you do for school, is A through F. These are based on density, which is how many cars there are per lane, which is illustrated in the graphic. Traditionally, A through C is considered passing. When we start looking at D, we start considering it to be nearing capacity. So we really want to start focusing in on it. And we consider E and F to be failing conditions. So that's when we identify that there is an issue that we need to mitigate. Go ahead and go to the next slide. We also look at things like origins and destinations, or where you're coming from and where you're going to. These are incredibly important. And we have some of that illustrated here in the AM and PM, which we'll see in a few slides, for northbound and southbound Route 8 and 95. These are incredibly important because it really determines how people use the facility and can help us identify how to possibly improve some conditions on the main line, as well as know that our analysis is correct. So this is the AM southbound Route 8 and 95 trips. Go ahead and go to the next slide. And these are the northbound Route 8 and 995 trips. Now, something also to consider along with this is we want to quantify how many people are passing through a study area and how many people are staying local to a study area. And what I mean by that is, if somebody's traveling along I-95 and passes through Fairfield and Bridgeport, their solutions, if they're a large percentage of the users, may be different than somebody who's wanting to get on in Bridgeport and get back off in Bridgeport. So we want to consider all those aspects. And to that end, if you want to go to the next slide, we start to get a picture of how operations actually look during the existing conditions. And right now we can see breakdowns starting in the AM at southbound. They're pretty consistent between the 6 a.m. and 9 a.m. Peak period, with average operating speeds at about 38 miles an hour. And we do have some congestion out there. Right now, your travel time end to end in the study area is about 45% higher than it would be than underneath an uncongested time. And if we go to the next slide, we conducted a forecast to examine what it will look like in the future under a no-build condition, which means there's no improvements conducted. And what you can see is if we do nothing, those travel speeds drop even further to 23 miles an hour. And that's an average throughout the study area. But now the travel time is increased by 139% over what the free flow speed would be. So obviously, if nothing is done, things will get much worse. Now we can go ahead and go to the next slide, which is just the PM. And again, we summarize this information to ensure that we understand that we have a really good basis and understanding of how traffic is flowing in the sub area in both the southbound, if you want to go to the next slide, and then the northbound conditions as well. And again, this is just to ensure that we really understand the travel behaviors so we can help solve not only spot problems like is this interchange or that ramp broken, but rather try to help people better traverse the corridor. Go ahead and go to the next slide. And for the PM, we can again see breakdowns. This extends back again from 23, our exit 23 back in the PM condition. Average speed's about 36 miles an hour, and your end-to-end travel time is about 53% higher than it would be under a free flow condition. And again, if we go to the PM, I'm sorry, if we go to the no build future condition, we can see things get much, much worse. Now southbound is breaking down during the PM condition, extending back from exit 22 again, as we saw underneath the AM. Route 8 is really starting to light up red, and things get much worse with end-to-end travel times increasing to 150% of typical free flow conditions. Now, all this is important because congestion leads to a lot of different challenges along the corridor, including safety, which if we go to the next slide, what we can find here is that of the 5,452 crashes, the top 3 were front to rear, angle, and sideswipe within the study area. These are all heavily driven and influenced by congestion. So one thing we want to do is if we could solve the congestion problem out here, we can really get to more root causes of what some of the other safety patterns that we may see out here and help mitigate some of those challenges within the study area. Go to the next slide. So again, just some key takeaways that we observed during our analysis is that, a lot of these congestion issues and challenges along the corridor are driven by closely spaced interchanges where you have a lot of ramps really close to one another. You have really short on and off ramps, which doesn't give you enough time to slow down or speed up to get on. And like we identified, those signals at the bottom of the interchanges, a lot of them are failing in that E and F range, which causes them to either back up onto the interstate or make it hard to even get on. So there's a lot that we need to take a look at there. In the AM, the southbound is really heavily congested and will only get worse in the future. And then PM gets worse in almost every direction as you go into that no build horizon. The safety takeaways is that congestion is really a main driver between the predominant number of crashes along the corridor. And we really want to focus in when we're doing our alternative solutions to help mitigate those, to bring those crashes down and help further provide safety enhancements along the corridor. So with that, I believe that we will step into another Q&A session. I know I covered a lot of ground. I'm happy to answer any questions about any of the traffic analysis and safety. Again, if you want to raise your hand and or post something in the Q&A.
I'll give folks a couple seconds to see if anybody has a question. In the Q&A right now, we don't have a question right now, but again, if you do have a question, you can feel free to raise your hand at any time during the presentation, and we'll make sure when we get to these breaks, I can unmute you and you can ask your question, or you might you can always save it till the end. We'll have an open session at the end. Right now, nobody has their hand up as far as questions go, JJ, so I think we can continue on.
That's okay. Yeah, let's go ahead and, we have one question. We have a hand
Okay,
raised.
Lynn Moore. Hold on
Hey,
one sec.
how
There
can
you
we
go.
help you? What can we do as residents to help support your efforts?
That's a good question. Karen or Neil, is there any specific thing you direct the public to do?
Well, I think part of that is, getting the word out so folks, know about our study, know about the meetings that come up. We're in contact with the municipalities, so there's always information that the municipalities have, but we have a website that we'll probably cover at the end of our presentation.
Yeah.
But for now, it's really getting the word out. Make sure people know about our study, and then comments. We did receive a lot of feedback from the folks that did attend our in-person meetings last week, one in Fairfield and one in Bridgeport. So we're to continue to do that, continue the outreach process as we continue with the study.
Can I add on to that answer? Just because it's a good question, Lynn. And I think one of the things that we're in the process right now of trying to understand where the needs are, right? And so obviously we have data, but you live here, work here, the conditions of the environment better than we do. So we want to make sure, first of all, that our data is communicating the right thing, but also if we missed anything, what we want the public to tell us is, hey, there's something else here that we really need you to look at. And then as we get further on in the process, we'll have different alternatives. And these are the things that the DOT is going to pursue over time to address the transportation mobility needs. And we want to make sure we get all the right, alternatives on the table. So again, like Neil said, make sure people know about this, because there will be moving forward, we'll be recommending things, and without public feedback, we could potentially get some of it wrong, and so it's really important for the public to be informed on this.
And one last comment, if I could add on there, Mike, I think that was great. And Lynn, if you haven't already checked it out on our website, there is a survey that you can leave feedback that way. You can leave a comment on our website, or you could reach out to any one of us with any contact that you'll see at the presentation to give us really your input. But along what Neil said, of course, whenever you can share the information about when these meetings are happening, or even about the project itself, we'd greatly appreciate it. So, and thanks for being here today and asking that question. Let me see. I don't think I see any other hands up or any questions. And Lynn, did we answer your question there?
Yeah, that was great. I did send you guys, I sent Dave an email, and I'm gonna take the survey. I'd like to follow your progress, because I'm really interested in what you're doing.
Great.
Thank you.
Perfect. And please leave your email at the end of the survey. That way you'll be a part of the newsletter, or the outreach list for when these meetings are happening and when we'll be in town and all that kind of stuff, or more updates on the project.
Thank you. Great
Very
job,
welcome.
guys.
All right. So we also understand that, there's so much more to this other than just cars, right? We understand that there's a larger need in the entire study area to assess mobility from a variety of perspectives. So we've also gone out and done a robust analysis of sidewalk and crosswalk gaps within the study area. And what we ended up finding was that, there was 3.4 miles of missing sidewalk within the study area. There was also 13 signals without crosswalks and 143 missing crosswalks along cross streets. These are things that we really want to make a part of what our solutions could be for this. And to talk about how we can enhance bicycle mobility, walkability, and a variety of other things. And to kind of expand on not only why these gaps are important, but the demand, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Mike to speak more about that analysis.
Yeah, thanks, JJ. Yeah, and we know that, this is a mobility study, and the highway is a big component of mobility, but it's also a highway that goes through a heavily urbanized area. So we know, it needs to accommodate people who are walking and bicycling and taking transit. So we're doing an inventory to understand really where are those popular destinations to walk and bike. And, I think the message of this slide is really schools, parks, and train stations for the most part. We have a lot of pedestrian activities you'd imagine at the Sacred Heart, Fairfield universities, University of Bridgeport, but also the beach and Seaside Park, Beardsley Park, as well as the Fairfield and Black Rock metro stations. And of course, we know, these are the top 6, but we know that every bus stop has a component of walking. And that's really important to understand, making sure that walking is safe from when you get on and off the bus to wherever your destination is. And then similarly, we looked at data that showed where people are bicycling, and go back one slide, please. And a lot of those bicycle activity is really focused on in the Bridgeport area. So you can see a lot of destinations in downtown, the Black Rock neighborhood, again, parks and such, and then popular routes really along the Post Road and Fairfield Avenue. And so we're going to be looking at some of those roads to make sure that bicycling amenities are in place so people can bike safely. We also took a look at short car trips, because short car trips are trips that could potentially be converted to bike and walk trips. And especially as the region's road systems get more and more congested over time, you really need to make sure that there are really safe alternatives to driving. And our study corridor, you can kind of see in the lower left-hand corner of the screen, it really covers the area right around the highway and the rail line. But we took a more expansive look throughout Fairfield and Bridgeport. And what this graphic shows is all of those automobile trips that are less than 1 mile in length. So the bigger the dot means the more trips started or ended there, and the thicker the arrow is the heavier trip interactions between those origins and destinations. So again, you can start to see patterns. For example, Sacred Heart University to Trumbull Mall, a lot of very short trips by car. We're going to take a look at the roads in between those to see if they have adequate pedestrian and bicycle facilities, because those could be great opportunities to see if we can move or encourage people from cars to take different types of trips. Certainly, there's a lot of interaction downtown Bridgeport to the various neighborhoods and parks around downtown. And so again, we'll look at the full road infrastructure to make sure that people can get around in multiple ways. And then finally, the public transit system. Bridgeport and Fairfield are situated in one of the nation's, if not the world's, busiest transportation corridors for public transit. The commuter rail system, Metro North, there are 4 rail stations within this study area. Ridership took a hit, obviously, during the COVID years as train service was decreased and people were not riding, but that's been rebounding since 2022. So there's been a 62% increase since then, and it continues to climb. Similarly, there's intercity rail, and that's the Amtrak service primarily. There's about a dozen trains that go in each direction through Bridgeport on its way to either New York or Boston. So, Bridgeport remains a real hub for longer distance train trips, almost 100,000 of those being made each year. And then buses. Buses serve a really vital, important role here in the transportation system. And there's a real active, Greater Bridgeport Transit operates service with a hub in Bridgeport, and the Coastal Link, which runs along Route 1, is obviously a very popular route as well. And so we want to continue to make sure that we're enhancing transit bus opportunities throughout the corridor. One of the things on this graphic that I think is most interesting to look at is that lower right-hand corner. This is the percentage of households that don't own an automobile. And you can see in Bridgeport, there's about 22% of households don't even have an automobile, whereas in Fairfield, it's 1%. So that shows you the difference between, the city and the suburban locations in Fairfield. Transit's important, not just for everybody to have alternatives to driving, but it's absolutely essential for those who don't own an automobile. So that's why we really need to pay particular attention to making sure that we're looking at options that promote walking, biking, and transportation and public transit. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. I'll take it over with talking about public engagement and what we've been doing so far in both Bridgeport and Fairfield. We've been engaging with the public in a few different ways. On the left-hand side of what you're looking at here are just some comments that we've gotten through our survey. or through meetings, any of the pop-ups we've been to. On the right-hand side, you can see all the different images of the pop-ups we've been to. But we've been at farmers markets. We've been at, as Rick mentioned in the beginning, at Latino Fest. We've been at food truck festivals. And when we are at these events, the picture that you see there on the right-hand side with the Post-its and the board, that's usually how we're talking to folks, where we're asking how they get around, how they rate their public transportation system, and then leave some general comment of what their experience is like in and around I-95. The top right-hand picture that you see there is a heat map of where we're getting folks leaving comments on our survey. So you can see it's heavily concentrated on that I-95 corridor with some hot spots near the actual highway. You can see large hotspots near downtown Bridgeport again, and near Seaside Park, near the metro stations. That's where folks are leaving a lot of their feedback. And again, feel free to check out the website and go on the survey. We've received over 1,000 individual responses so far on that survey. And we're seeing really some high level, some high topics that are popping up there are really around safety, and making that bike and pedestrian experience a lot better, as well as very interesting things that we're hearing from folks all along the lines of having more rest stops for trucks, even lighting on the highway and near homes. Really any comment we will receive. You never know what alternative it might inspire really to look at. But again, we'll continue this kind of engagement throughout the project. So we'll continue asking folks to take the survey. We'll continue to be out in the community, talking to folks and being at the events that folks like to be at, so we can be there and come out to you. And Lynn, just to go back another way that the public can help is we're always open to going to places. So if you know of any event in the future that might be well attended, feel free to send out any, any opportunities there so that we can follow up on.
All right, we're gonna go
We're
ahead
gonna
and
open
back
it back up to
again.
Q&A. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So if anybody has any questions again, please feel free again to raise your hand and or type something in the Q&A. We could pause briefly before we hand it off to Joe and his team.
I think we have a hand up. Kathleen, you can go ahead and ask your question there.
Thank you. I live in Fairfield on Paper Mill Lane, which is practically right on the state of Connecticut's property. And we have a lot of issues with noise pollution and lighting problems from the southbound concession area, stoppage area. A lot of it has to do with trucks coming in, pollution from the trucks, actually, just when they're standing. And also just the general area is not well maintained. So there literally is, across the street from me, I'm at the end that is near Round Hill Road, and across the street is a chain link fence that separates the opposite side of the street from me to the state property. That's how open it all is, which in a way I really don't mind personally, because I rather like the naturalness of it. But beyond the naturalness of it is problems with, again, the noise, the lighting, people walking their animals there, which again is fine, but it becomes almost an issue. I feel afraid. I say. So I think Paper Mill Lane, we also have issues. We're wedged between the middle school, the high school, Fairfield University, downtown, the train station. Train station's a 10-minute walk. so we're kind of a road within town can be an issue because the town is always, people are always using it as a cut through, which is something, you know, I know the town has to deal with. But again, our concerns related to the rest area is something that I think, you know, can be looked at. So who are the people in town? You said there's a community group. Do you have a name of somebody that I can reach out to in the Fairfield area? Anybody?
Are you asking like who's like part of our project advisory committee that's from Fairfield that you can reach out to? Or
Yeah, no, I think you said you had community groups that are working with the communities.
yeah, and
Am
we're
I correct?
and we're
Mm.
always welcome or welcoming more. Or do you represent a certain group?
No,
No?
no, I
Okay.
don't. But I
Okay, well,
will. And if there's
yeah.
already a group, I'd like to connect with it if you have someone.
Yeah, no, what we have is a project advisory committee, where folks, meet up there, and really get updated on the project. And
Okay.
part of that project advisory committee, there's, nonprofit organizations, there's the municipalities that are there, other organizations who are really just interested in the project and I-95 in general. There's like Fairfield, the Bike and Ped Committee. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they're definitely a part of this, and I believe a couple of them came to our Fairfield meeting on the, what was it, the 18th?
Yes,
February
yes, I
18th.
heard about that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I could connect you to a couple of them because they're
Yeah.
well represented, and I think they'd probably be a really good group to work with, as far as even staying up to date with the project.
But
Okay.
just to add
That
to
would,
that, so Raul, I think we have some neighborhood associations, NRZs in Fairfield. I think BlackRock, I believe there's others. So, we can review some of those neighborhood groups that we have on our pack right now, I think, within Fairfield. And
so I'm sorry, Nylish, is that correct? Am I pronouncing your name correctly?
yeah, you can call me Neil. It's fine.
Neil. Okay, Neil. So you would take an organization. I know my community here. I know my neighbors would be
Yes,
very
for sure.
Yes,
Okay.
very much.
So,
Yes.
all right. So, all right, great. And if you could connect me with even another neighborhood group, that would be great.
Yeah, for
And-
sure.
And just
And
to,
if I can
definitely-
add, I was just going to add something too, if I may.
go ahead.
Kathleen, I think those questions are phenomenal. And it shows that you really have interest and have a lot of input that could help us. And once we, look at different solutions that we could gain input from people like you, then once a project is defined, things like light pollution and noise pollution, those things will be directly analyzed during the project aspect of the study. And so if we can understand what those needs are early on, like you're bringing them up to us now, it's incredibly valuable. So we really appreciate this input. And going through either a member of the PAC and getting some of your input heard, so it's more solidified in the record, or joining the PAC as a neighborhood representative yourself would be phenomenal.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I appreciate all the information. It's great. Thank you.
And I believe one of your neighbors was at the meeting last week and spoke
Yes.
specifically about your same concerns, right? So the
Yes.
noise, the light pollution from the rest area. And if anybody else on the team remembers, I thought they had a contact at the department, in terms of, because it's probably one of our, I would think maybe our maintenance folks or someone who they oversee the operations at the rest area, but we can definitely find out some more information. But they did say that they had the same exact concerns that you did.
Yes.
There's been some improvements that were done, but maybe not,
No. Well, I don't think as a neighborhood, one end of our street is very transit. Young families come in and kind of move on. And then my neighbor that you're speaking of, her family and my family have been here for years. So we kind of know a little bit more and I think are a little bit more concerned at this point. So yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yep, thank you. No, thank you for the comment.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there any other additional questions or thoughts anybody else would like to raise before we move along? We'll just give it a minute to see if anybody raises their hand or types in the Q&A. Not seeing anything, and it's actually kind of a perfect segue because I'm going to pass it off to Joe to literally talk about the other additional resources that we look at. So go ahead, Joe.
All right, thank you, JJ. Kathleen, perfect opportunity to ask your questions as we go into this slide. So one of the components of the Pell study is we look at existing conditions in the corridor, and to do that, we spend a little bit of time looking at both the built environment and the natural environment. And so very much interested in where these sensitive resources are located in the corridor. And so, for example, from the built environment, we look at community facilities, we look at homes, we look at hospitals, places that may be sensitive to noise conditions. We also look at historic properties, parks, where people could be having recreational facilities. So all of these are identified during this stage of the Pell study. And on the natural side, there's a whole nother host of resources, including wetlands and water bodies, where we have farmland, where we could have habitat for certain species. Air quality is another concern that you mentioned that we look at from a natural resources perspective. So all of these are considered, from an identification standpoint at this stage. Why do we do this? Because as solutions are developed, we have to understand how those solutions integrate with these resources and where they could potentially have impacts. So, for example, if we have highways or transit lines or bus lines that are intersecting with these resources, we want to understand what those potential impacts are. And as Rick mentioned earlier, you don't get into the level of detail in terms of impacts until you have an actual project and you can figure out what those specific impacts are, but it's very helpful at this stage to understand what they are. So if we go to the next slide, an example of how we looked at these resources in the corridor, this is a map that shows all of the water resources, waterways, and flood zones that are in the corridor. And as you can see by these highlighted hatched areas and blue areas, we have a fair number of water resources that we have to pay attention to. Often, the waterways are sources of flooding. And so you see those blue areas that are highlighted. Those are all flood zones that we have to pay attention to. So as we're looking at potential solutions in this area, how these solutions interact with these flood zones or these waterways are areas that we have to pay attention to and look at least initially at what those potential impacts are. So, to your point about noise, we definitely want to look at, all of those areas, residences, commercial areas, hospitals, parks, where people are living and working and exposed to noise to see what those noise levels could potentially do once we have a project. So with that, I will turn it over to Rick, who's going to talk a little bit about purpose and need and where we go from here in terms of the study. So Rick?
Thanks, Joe. And kind of to tie some of this all together. As we stated at the beginning, one of the outcomes of a planning and environment linkages study such as this is to understand what the needs are in the corridor, and therefore what the purpose or what the objectives of the study are and how we can address the transportation issues. And you've heard a lot about, JJ has gone through a lot of the transportation and the automobile aspects. We've heard from Mike about a lot of the other modes of transportation. And we hope to be able to define the needs for all users in the corridor. We have heard that we have a difference between two communities in the corridor in what percentage of the households own vehicles. We have heard the difference in or how many short trips are have been identified, and how different corridors might be able to take cars off the road if other modes of transportation are enhanced. So the Pell is intended to look at these larger planning issues and integrate with them so we don't preclude any other one, and maybe enhance these other planning activities as we identify the needs in the project. And once the needs are identified through this coordination with the public and through the engineers' analyses, then we look at what the objectives in the study are. So this purpose and need that we will set up those boundaries once again for our first level of screening of any solutions that come along. And then we'll use things like Joe has pointed out with the baseline conditions and baseline environmental resources, both the human resources and the natural resources, of what kind of impacts these different solutions have on community use, on businesses, on roadway, and on the actual solving the needs that have been identified. So this, if you want to hit the next slide. So our next steps are to develop this purpose and need statement and bring it back to the PAC members and to the public. And once we get this identified and solidified and verified, then we'll start using this as our first gauge to look at the range of potential solutions to meet those needs. So I think we're going to hand it back to you, JJ. Is that right?
You are. And I want to make a point too. Rick very succinctly pointed out something when we were talking about purpose and need. And an important part of this is that this is beyond the interstate. This is much more about the communities and the homes and people that we are affecting. And as part of that, we're undergoing an additional step known as the mobility equity screening within the study area to really look back at a lot of the information that Mike and I talked about in terms of how people travel within the study area by a mode other than vehicle, looking at things beyond the interstate to try to enhance that. So that is another portion of the study that will be coming next. We're going to be looking for more involvement and outreach during those efforts. So what we'd ask is for you to please be involved. That is our big request with this entire effort, is to try to understand what you would like to see in your communities. We can do as much as we can with computers and data and all the good stuff that we know how to do, but without your input, we're really just, doing our best here to craft something based on mathematics. And we want to hear how we can make your communities better. To do that, go to our website at I-95 Fairfield-Bridgeport.com, as well as joining the mailing list. And to do that, you need to complete the survey, which is included in the link on the screen. And with that, we'll open it up to a general Q&A in case anybody has any last questions they've been saving for the end of the presentation. So we'll go ahead and pause here for a few minutes to see if anybody's hands go up or if anybody has anything to post in the Q&A section.
Just gonna check the Q&A to see if there's any questions on there. Don't have any questions on the Q&A. So I'll give it a minute here. If anybody has any other questions they'd want to ask, just feel free to raise your hand.
Oh, I'd like to go back and talk a little bit further about the service plazas and Kathleen's concern about light pollution and noise pollution. As you guys had stated, we did talk to other, I guess, neighbors on Paper Mill Lane at our in-person meeting. Since that meeting, we reached out to the director of concessions at Connecticut DOT and let them know of the concern. Specifically, the light pollution is known. I know that the director had worked with trying to get plantings installed, and part of the concerns are the plantings are dying. So we voiced that concern. She's looking into it, and I just kind of wanted to let you know we have made contact. So she's reaching out to see with the service station owner what can be done.
Okay, thank you. I'll get that information back to my neighbor.
Yes, and we're also planning to forward that information as well to them. I am hoping.
Oh, okay, great.
I'm hoping we have their contact information from the in-person meeting, so.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep.
I think Lynn, you have your hand raised. You can go ahead.
I was just wondering, you guys are on social media? Question mark?
No, we don't have a social media. I do think we will, though, heading into the next kind of phase of this project. Right now, we're asking anybody who's like collaborated with us on the project or who has social media to share this project on their social media. So like folks from the bike tours group in Bridgeport, they've shared it on their Facebook group. We've asked the municipalities to share it on their social media. Is that a way that you usually keep in touch with? Is that how you prefer to keep in touch with projects, or that's just my own question? So,
I think it's, I do a lot of sharing. So,
okay,
Instagram particularly,
gotcha. Okay.
but LinkedIn might be good too. I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, no social media right now, but as soon as we have one going, we can definitely share that with everyone.
Well, I found you guys through Sarah Keat, the state representative. So I saw your meetings when she shared it. So that was helpful.
Great, perfect. Yeah, that's what we've been asking really the community to help us out with, is just keep spreading the word. So good to hear that you learn about the meeting that way.
Yeah, and like Raul said, I think we'll assess the need for social media, expanding the social media next phase.
All right. Any other additional questions or comments before we wrap things up? Not seeing anything in the queue or hands raised, unless Raul, if you want to correct me on that.
No, yeah, I don't. Nothing on the Q&A, and no one's. I think no hands raised, so I think we're good.
Okay, no, perfect. If you want to go ahead and advance it, I just want to thank everybody for their time this evening. It's been a lot of hard work, but we couldn't do it without public engagement and everybody that's been involved in this project to date. We look forward to engaging. Again, the website is I-95 Fairfield-Bridgeport.com. Please go there. Please interact with the survey to join the mailing list. And again, thank you for your time this evening. Goodbye.